An octopus has 3 hearts. 1, 2, 3. Each heart has a slightly different role in propelling the octopus's glorious body through the murky depths of the ocean. To taste, touch, feel, pulse, all 3 hearts must work together. In our collective movement toward liberation, with every body-mind unique and essential to the whole, we each have different roles to fill. It is a collective effort to propel our movements forward, a collective effort to keep our movements alive. The title of this documentary reflects the collective spirit and nature of Crip body minds, the praxis of disability justice, and the future worlds we co-create. Loving with 3 Hearts, a Sins Invalid production.
Ableism is so fucked up real.
It is so.
It is so real and so painful. It's just a different kind of oppression. This oppression that the non-disabled world does not
understand.
Yeah.
They don't comprehend.
Oh, do you want to take off the mask while you're speaking?
Working on this project during the pandemic was quite interesting.
It's interesting.
It's been pretty interesting.
It's so beautiful to be able to be working with artists and working creatively again. But the pandemic certainly adds a lot of layers of difficulty.
I feel like even still to this day, 7 months into the pandemic, it still seems something like out of a movie.
So this is the tight shot that you don't want it to come. This is coming from the side.
We didn't know, how to do it. There's never been a pandemic. We're in the midst of an international rebellion against anti-Black violence. We're in the midst of, a potential fascist takeover. I think the hard part was the timing, because we had to, move and pivot very quickly.
So even though we weren't exactly at the beginning of pandemic, we were at the beginning of people figuring out how to still do theater and performance during a pandemic.
Having to figure out, making sure that everybody in my team, everybody that was associated with this project was very cautious and aware of how COVID was and how we make our space safe and clean. It has been the number one thing to have to focus on. Than just normal, where do we go, what do we do, what do we eat?
The theaters are adapting to COVID. You can't have a theater production. People can't go to the theater. So they're like, what do we do now? Oh, we do this streaming kind of service. But there's rules about how many people could be in a space at a time.
For the filming portion, we had to really step back and rethink how we did most everything to make sure we were being safe. I think it was harder for the performers being separated by not only the schedule, but geography as well.
I'm really used to having the energy of all of the actors and the crew, and now, I'm either in a room by myself or on the phone with Patty. What's different is really just kind of feeling isolated and really excited to see how it all comes together at the end.
I am Mistress Asthma, and I want to scare you, make you think you're dying. Maybe you will. What kind of attack are you hoping for, my sweet? The kind that will land you in the emergency room at a moment's notice? Or does the slow terror of breathlessness building to a sharp crescendo of panic turn you on? You told me your yeses, your maybes, and your no's. Maybe I can tap my wildfire ashes onto your face, smother you in nuclear waste, and shower you with stormwater runoff. You do want to carry the umbrella so the acid rain doesn't sting my pretty eyes. You're open to fracking, but you need to be warmed up first. I'm very interested in filling your whole atmosphere with my dirty greenhouse gases. You would like that, wouldn't you, darling?
I'm very used to being in the green room with people and having an entire week of full support. The wonderful thing about it is that Patty managed to get it done. Even though I was here in Houston, she coordinated everything with amazing people who made everything feel like almost as if I were really over there doing it in person.
Yeah, it was really a lot of work to hire 4 theaters, but not just the theaters, but the technical crew for every site and a film crew for every site.
When we were doing the choreography, I was very proud, I was very happy and very accomplished to see what Maria was able to achieve in such a different situation, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, long distance learning, and she did amazing.
They're ready for us whenever.
All right, we're ready.
The origin of flamenco, the music of the Rome people, of the Gitanos, a music and dance of suffering, of pain, of love, of sensuality, and of resistance to oppression.
We were talking about, okay, well, how can we crip flamenco? How can we imagine, our bodies, our body minds as really, embodying or personifying flamenco? The Rome people that created flamenco, they are persecuted, marginalized people of color, nomadic people, often who were working very precarious, dangerous jobs, right? Miners and blacksmiths and so on. And so a lot of them would acquire disabilities. They would die. They would be living in chronic pain. So disability really was part of life for them, but it hasn't. Flamenco now typically is seen as a very able-bodied dance, right? That is not the essence of flamenco. The essence of flamenco, is that deep pain and suffering, and also the redemption. And so, getting to that, it is a Crip thing. It is Crip genius. It is Crip embodiment.
Houston, we have disabled people waiting in high water. Houston, we have people who had to abandon everything.
I'm sorry, can you go back? We had an equipment issue.
We're gone. Take 1.
Being prepared means having access to resources, access to the necessary extras reserved for the privileged who don't think are privileged. They stand in front of us in their 3-piece suits, asking if we are ready. Do we have an extra wheelchair? Do we have non-perishable goods stored away? Do we have a way to get out if we get hit by Mother Nature's anger? She's right to be angry, She's tired of being raped by human greed. Crips who live on fixed incomes can't afford to buy extra food. Sometimes when we do, we eat it when we run out of food before our benefits arrive. Crips who need physical access and attendance don't do well in shelters. Crips with sensory disabilities can't handle crowded spaces. Most Crips who can breathe on their own can't afford to own a generator able to generate the same opportunity of survival. Crips can't afford to live being prepared for the worst, although the worst will always hit us harder.
Nobody knows what we've been through.
You know, we are all so unique and individual, and we exist in our personal spaces just as we are, and we have the right to do so.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's what disability justice is, and that's when Sins Invalid comes in, teaching all of us that we have the right to ask for whatever the fuck we need.
Yes.
The pandemic has shown us that a more accessible world is possible, but that it only becomes a priority when able-bodied people are impacted by not having their access needs met.
I don't think I've learned anything necessarily new about disability working on this project, but I think it's like solidified how, you know, we gotta put people first and people's needs first. And I think that's something that's happened in the pandemic too, where it's like, you really have to think about everyone's health a lot more when working together. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
There was an issue around the COVID safety protocol, and someone was possibly not going to be involved because they were worried about the COVID protocol. And I was ready to charge ahead and do the project anyways. And another team member who has more experience with accessibility slowed it down and made sure that we could follow a procedure that meant that that person could be a part of the project. And for me, that was a really important learning experience, because as an able-bodied person, I sometimes move too quickly and I forget about these things, and I want to build a practice that is more inclusive of all people.
There's kind of this like push through it kind of thing that's normal for theater, and that isn't how we operate as a disability justice org.
The vibe I get is everything is based on being time efficient, about executing things perfectly. And if you don't, then, you know, that's just on you and you lost the moment. And it's like, no. First of all, we're going for authenticity and passion. And secondly, we're not going to just blow over the fact that, you know, people, in order to be authentic and passionate and really, you know, shine and be in our power, we have to be as little physically and emotionally compromised as possible.
Sins was the first place I felt like I could bring all the pieces of myself, that I didn't have to leave any part of myself at the door, but also that there was a way that I came to understand myself, having a space where I was given some space and comfort to own lifelong disability and chronic health issues that I've been having, that I really had not been able to fully articulate.
We have 10 more minutes of filming time.
Energetically, how do you feel, Antoine?
So first, actually, I do want to just check, does anyone here have any access needs right now that aren't being met?
There was a new type of lingo that I had learned. What's your access needs? That kind of threw me off. Those things are very on point to me now. Now I actually added that into my phrases.
And I think it's something that should be shared in every space and then normalized in every space. Like, what do you need to be present or to be in community? And that looks different for every individual. And at every moment it changes per individual too.
I think that centering access needs as an organization helps us reconnect with each other as humans, because within capitalism, historically, people aren't treated as people. We're commodified.
And we don't have to be ashamed of our access needs, right? Like, people so often you know, like, oh, I'm sorry. And I mean, I find myself saying it as well. It's really hard to kind of extricate the ableism from ourselves, you know, because it's everywhere, just like white supremacy and capitalism and every other systemic oppression. Everybody needs to eat. You know, everybody needs to go to the bathroom. These aren't special needs. You know, everybody needs, like, you know, some sort of emotional regulation. And it's so painful to me that all of that is put onto disabled bodies, you know, that we're the ones that are needy, you know, and that other people are always fine. I'm fine. No, actually, I don't think anyone is a just independently floating brain. We all have bodies, and all bodies are amazing, and all bodies have a fragility. I mean, life is incredibly fragile and powerful, you know, as climate change is showing us. I think the world would be very different if people acknowledged the labor that it takes to live.
No matter what you heard, Black people are in the future. We are the future. The powers that be choose to not hear us when we say, the land is ours, the planet is hurting, wear a mask, protect the water, Black lives matter. No body is disposable. And then I turn to my community, and they too are selective of which Black lives matter to them. They don't think Black disabled lives matter. Their ableism allows them to exclude us because they fear becoming us. Y'all may not want to hear this, though. We know that we listen with more than our ears. We listen with our entire bodies. We listen with our core. We feel and transmit those vibrations. We dance to communicate. We move to theorize. We shake to spread the word. We listen in sensual ways. Why don't you? What will it take for you to listen to us? How do we know we can trust you? There will come a time, that time may have already come for some, when folks will want to elbow their way to the front of the table and demand they be listened to. That's not how community building and collaboration works. You cannot inject yourself into a space created for us, by us, and demand a seat at the table. That is colonization. You need to get in line with the others who have worked to help us assemble the table before you share. You must observe and learn, listen and absorb. Then you must do the work to demonstrate you deserve to be here at the table. Usually that means helping us extend the table so that you may join. Everybody has a role. We don't need any fluffers. Stop the chaos, the killing of our Black and brown children. Black and brown drones continue to kill as they work endless for their kingdom. Black and brown workers continue to be killed as they tire endless work for their kingdom. Black and brown queens continue to be killed in their home as they try to rest from dedication and commitment to work, servicing their kingdom. Don't you learn? The bees cannot live without flowers, and the flower cannot live without the bee.
Well, we started having a conversation about this performance several years ago because I knew that we couldn't, in any political integrity, talk about disability justice without acknowledging the context that we were in, which was, you know, extreme crisis on the globe. And we also know that the people that get hit the hardest are Crips. So you are in profile to the audience. Would be great. And then also turning toward the audience at times would be great. Like those two positions.
Do you recall what it was that finally allowed you to realize climate chaos is real? I remember I was in Puerto Rico when I noticed that Hurricane Katrina had devastated New Orleans. It was Puerto Rico that had access to international news stories and could show us what was really going on. It showed the truth and the reality of poor people, Black people, Native New Orleanians struggling to survive. Do you remember where you were when you realized Puerto Rico was devastated? I was in New Orleans. Puerto Rico is blacked out, without electricity or running water. I was in New Orleans where I had gone to grieve my mother, one of my first relationships on the planet. I thought New Orleans would be the place to hold me while I grieved because of the deep, deep connections to magic, the surreal, life, and syncopated spiritual practices. It was there that I learned of the flooding, of the heat, the blackouts, the loss of home, the loss of communication. I remember grieving in layers. I became scared of the ocean, scared of water. I knew the ocean was always powerful and to be respected no matter where I was. And it felt lonely, surrounded by people who knew this, flooding and loss, and only one friend who would speak to me about it. It was work and more trauma for those people who survived Hurricane Katrina to witness me and my grief and my loss.
I think one thing that makes me angry about climate change and climate chaos is that we could have done something about it a long time ago, and we've known that it was happening for a long time, and that there's all this money in the world that could be going to actually addressing the problems, and that it doesn't. And it just feels like it's way too late for people to be getting on board.
Really, related to climate change, what makes me angry is that people make the same mistakes. When we have facts that tell us about what's going on with our world, you know, we live in this world together. So why don't we all work together to improve the condition of the world? Instead, we let other people be responsible for taking care of the world, and we do the same old things.
Climate chaos is inherently disabling, and everything that has supported and enabled and perpetuates climate chaos is also disabling. So it's really imperative that we come together to build community and movement around looking at these intersections of climate and disability justice, so those connections and that inherentness can be revealed a little bit more.
This year, the fires have been, on the West Coast, the wildfires have been just almost apocalyptic. And I don't know how the next years are going to be. How are they going to play out? What are we going to be seeing in the future for our communities?
The timing of the performance was perfect because we needed solace, we needed community, and we needed to reestablish a vision for the future in which we're included, in which the needs of the body and life itself and the integrity and sacredness of humanity in harmony with the planet is uplifted. And I think disability justice as a movement and as a set of principles really does that.
The pandemic just made what I was saying in my performance more pertinent in applying it to today's situation. Will the firefighters listen to me that I need my AAC device when they are rescuing me from the flames? Will my electronic voice be saved, or will it disintegrate in the ash? When our homes shake, break, and crumble as the big one finally shatters our very foundation and the aftermath of the earthquake, will we learn to clutch each other as lifelines and save each other? No matter the condition of our body or minds. Or will we scatter, reach at each other because our skin is different. Our gender is different. Our sexuality is different. Our abilities are different. Will we have the courage
Not only are disabled Black and brown folks the ones least likely to contribute to climate change, we're the ones that are the most impacted. We're kind of right at that nexus of environmental racism. You know, those of us from the global south also are really getting hit hard by climate change.
The air quality in the Central Valley of California, where I live currently, is one of the worst in the nation, and it exacerbates a lot of pulmonary conditions that make communities vulnerable to things like COVID. And throughout this pandemic, the Central Valley hasn't been prioritized because of the inhabitants. The people who live here are primarily brown and indigenous agricultural workers. There's a very large cultural and language barrier that exists between the resources that the government tries to send out and what the community actually needs.
We have to work together with the community to understand what the community needs. And I think that's something that is lacking a lot. And one of my friends who works with the Red Cross saw the show and they were like, yeah, like watching Maria's pieces, I was like, I do this kind of work and I'm over here. I have no idea what communities need and I'm telling them what they need. I'm telling them to be prepared to have these things. And I think it's like important to reflect that as we move forward.
And that this is not a theoretical problem, you know, or a problem that happens out there. There is here, like this is us.
I know that facing the reality that we're in is painful, and that can be difficult to know how to move forward. And so I feel like the politics of pleasure and our entitlement to have and experience pleasure in the midst of climate collapse is essential.
And cameras, are you guys good?
Rolling.
Okay, house going dark.
What do you do when everywhere you go, you're hated and wanted dead because you're loving Black people, recognizing stolen land, fighting for a future where your fat body can be comfortable and to be loved for all that you are? Where is your safe place? Where can you breathe? When was the last time you heard the bees buzzing? What makes you feel powerful? What makes you feel recognized by your community? What makes you feel a part of something bigger than yourself? How do you find pleasure in the midst of collapse?
So many of us weren't taught that we deserved pleasure, weren't given spaces to experience pleasure. In the piece that I did, I was really channeling and communicating with bees. We know that bees are in a state of emergency. Humans rely on bees for our food and for so much of the beauty that exists in the world. And bees are their own beings. that are going through something really intense and difficult, and the revelry that you can witness in a bee that's just like rolling around in the pollen in a flower, that is very inspiring to me. Like, that feels like a really good model for living and surviving in this world as it is.
Anything in this world that we can enjoy, we get to enjoy our bodies. I don't care what capitalism thinks about its perception of my body. And I don't believe in that definition of beauty. I don't believe in that definition of success or joy or pleasure. And so, like, how do Crips claim our bodies, and fat Crips and people whose bodies have been othered claim ourselves in a way that is like really honoring the beauty that's here, even while we know it can't be here forever.
So right now, the response that we have with ecological devastation is not sufficient, because we are still in this consumer capitalist system that relies on non-stop economic growth and resource deprivation. But I find hope in political philosophies like social ecology and disability justice provides a better vision of us having a better relationship with the environment and each other.
The regime that we're living under really, really sees the planet itself and our lives as disposable. And I think disability justice at the intersections with climate justice really disrupts that and calls us into new action and new commitments to each other, a new awareness of interdependence.
I think that the non-disabled world tends to see needing each other as a weakness, but in reality, it's how we stay strong. It is our resilience and our strength. When we need one another, it basically demonstrates our humanity, how real we are.
Our will to live is greater than your ability to get rid of us, no matter how hard you try. We will always come back. We will always return until one day you surrender to the realization of our immortality against the fragility of your boring normality. Yeah, baby, that day will come. The day will come when the normies learn our ways and hold on to us because we've already been there. We've survived the storm and resisted the norm of ableist oppressions that led to new revolutions and new revelations. Truths that narrate our Crip power to a new generation of Crips and to the normies who will be like us one day. Yeah, the day will come, we say, when the world is no longer afraid to see itself reflected in our image or written in the narrative of a disabled life. Non-disableness no longer glorified, but recognized as part of some people's journey into renewed Crip versions of themselves. Everyone will get there sooner or later. Some sooner than later. It's just a matter of time.
I see people today, they're learning to not just hear with their ears, but to hear with their heart. And that technique is what gives me hope.
I feel like there is this connection between different communities and a centering, at least in my world, of disability justice and anti-racism and queer-centered power, people working together that feels really valuable and makes new possibilities for the future.
Trees have care networks, like crips have care networks. Intricate webs of mycorrhizal fungi travel along underground root systems of mycelial networks, carrying messages from Bubby sassafras to chosen family walnut tree.
Cross-movement organizing and interdependence and leaning in on change and valuing change and the chaos that that brings is something that I think is really important and beautiful, and what is going to help all of us not just survive but thrive on the planet that we've inherited.
Any living organism continually has to face constraints in order to continue to live. Being alive is all about finding ways to get around whatever constraints that may occur, whether it be by the minute, by the day, by the year. The same thing goes for all creatures. And what gives me hope is that what I see around me everywhere, life does find a way.
We may or may not survive as a species, and that can be a hard thing to come to terms with. But as we go forward, this love that we have amongst ourselves, this community, it's so beautiful. And it wouldn't usher in the end of the world any other way.
We have like a whole body of beautiful beings, right? The human species that is at risk. So let's love each other through this.
I will fight for you. Will you fight for me?
Thank you. Thank you all.
This is my dream. This is my desire.
Africans moved across the middle desert, Arkansas, like slaves moved across the
Paris, Peru, Iraq, Iran, Grassroots, Jackie Robinson, Ventura County, moving
like black
all
folks, like
through all
Africans,
this,
Jamaica,
back and forth, and now, and we are